I knew something was off when I saw the cement truck idling in front of my house at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my coffee in my backyard when I heard the beep 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 of the truck reversing. It stopped right at the edge of my driveway. Then I saw her, Marla Kensington, the president of our beloved HOA, strutting around like she owned the entire block, clipboard in hand, barking orders at the driver like she was pouring a new sidewalk for the White House. My name's Seth Zimmerman. I'm a 39-year-old paramedic with a night shift schedule and a deep hatred for power-hungry HOA tyrants. I moved into this neighborhood in Westview Lakes 3 years ago. Quiet street, decent neighbors, and a pool I worked hard to build last summer. The pool was my reward after saving for 5 years and working overtime for most of it. Marla never liked the pool. "It's too blue," she once told me. Too blue. The woman had filed more complaints against me than I could count. My grass being 2 inches too long, my trash bins being on the curb an hour early, and once get this for using a non-compliant shade of beige for my mailbox. But this morning was something else entirely. I stepped out just as the truck started tilting its bed. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, jogging to the backyard gate. Marla turned her head slowly, acting surprised to see me. "Oh, Seth," she said, all fake Southern charm and venom. "We're just performing a necessary compliance correction. Your pool violates Article 9.3.2 of the HOA Charter. Unauthorized aquatic installations are subject to removal." "Removal? You're dumping concrete in it." The driver looked unsure, pausing mid-motion. Marla snapped at him. "Keep going." I leapt forward, but it was too late. Thick, wet concrete poured directly into my pool like a mudslide from hell. I stood there, frozen, watching $10,000 of hard work vanish under a blanket of gray sludge. "You're insane," I said, voice shaking. She adjusted her sunglasses like she was proud of herself. "You'll thank me. An eyesore like that only brings down property values." The board voted unanimously. The board? You mean your knitting circle of busybodies who meet at your kitchen table and pretend they're senators? Her smile dropped. I took pictures. Lots of them. Videos, too. Front of the truck, back of the truck, license plate, Marla giving orders, all of it. She didn't even flinch. This was an enforcement action. "You'll be billed." I didn't answer. I just walked back inside, pulled out the folder I kept in my file cabinet labeled HOA Nightmares, and started making calls. What she didn't know was that I'd already filed a cease and desist against her last month for harassment. And now she'd just committed felony property destruction. On camera. The first person I called was my buddy, Raphael, a real estate attorney with a personal grudge against HOAs. "She dumped wood in your pool," he said. "Concrete. Whole truckload. I've got everything recorded." He whistled. "That's not just civil court. That's criminal. Let's make her regret ever learning the word bylaws." By 4 that afternoon, 2 squad cars were parked in front of my house, and a uniformed officer was photographing the hardened mess in my backyard while another interviewed the cement truck driver, who looked pale enough to pass for a ghost. Officer Delaney, a tall woman with a no-nonsense tone and a badge that had clearly seen its share of drama, stood with her arms crossed as I handed her the flash drive containing video footage from my backyard security system. "Mr. Zimmerman, this is extensive," she said after watching the 40-second clip of Marla giving the hand signal to start pouring. "And you're sure you didn't authorize this work?" I didn't bother hiding my sarcasm. "Yeah, I just love waking up to having my pool turned into a Cold War bunker." She didn't laugh, but her jaw twitched slightly. "The fact that she directed commercial equipment onto your private property without your consent, with intent to alter or destroy it, that's not a code violation. That's criminal mischief, possibly felony vandalism, depending on the value. And that's before we even talk about trespassing." I nodded. "I got the original construction invoices and the valuation documents from the contractor who built it. Pool's worth over 30 grand, and that's not including the landscaping damage." Delaney's eyes narrowed. "That's felony territory." Just then, Marla rounded the corner in her beige Lexus. Yes, even her car was beige, and stopped when she saw the cruisers. Her face twisted into something between a forced grin and a panic attack as she stepped out, holding a folder like it was a holy relic. "Officers." "Oh, thank goodness." "I was just coming to explain. This is all a big misunderstanding. HOA procedural enforcement, entirely within our rights." Delaney didn't even look at the folder. "Ma'am, please step back. You're not currently under arrest, but you're being investigated for felony vandalism and trespassing. You have the right to remain silent, and I recommend you use that right until we finish reviewing the footage and documentation." Marla's mouth opened, closed, and opened again like someone had unplugged her vocal cords. "I had board approval," she said finally, her voice cracking. "It was a corrective landscaping measure." Delaney didn't blink. "You poured solid concrete into a resident's pool without a court order, permit, or owner consent. That's not corrective. That's malicious destruction of property." Marla looked at me like I'd just betrayed her at a family reunion. "You've always been difficult, Seth. You push the rules. You ignore the architectural guidelines. You think you're above the rest of us." I raised an eyebrow. "And you think you're the sheriff of a ghost town no one asked to live in." Delaney stepped between us. "That's enough. Mr. Zimmerman, we'll be processing this as a criminal case. I'll need copies of all your documentation, including any previous complaints or warnings you've received from the HOA. "Oh, I've got a binder," I said. "It's color-coded." Marla glared at me like I just confessed to arson. "You'll be hearing from our lawyers." Delaney turned to her. "Ma'am, you may want to get your own." And soon. The next morning, I dropped off the binder at the precinct, along with video logs from the past 6 months showing Marla harassing neighbors, trespassing to measure lawns with a tape measure, and once this was my favorite spray painting a neighbor's fence because the color wasn't harmonious with the community's aesthetic. By the end of the week, Raphael and I had filed a civil suit seeking damages for destruction of property, trespassing, and emotional distress. He also filed a motion for a temporary restraining order, barring Marla and any member of the HOA board from stepping foot on my property without a court order. We served the paperwork at the next HOA meeting, which Raphael and I attended in full view of the dozen or so homeowners packed into the rec center. As I walked in, I could feel the tension crackle. Marla sat at the head of the table, flanked by her 2 usual board puppets, Gina in the floral scarf and Harold with the twitchy eye. The room went dead silent as Raphael handed over the envelope. "This is for you, Miss Kensington," he said. "You'll find a summons to civil court, as well as a list of damages totaling $38,000. You're also being investigated by the county for criminal destruction of private property." Marla's hand shook as she took the papers. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You did this," Raphael said. "We're just making sure you answer for it." One of the homeowners, Tom, the retired Navy guy who lived 2 doors down, stood up from the back row. "Is this about the pool?" Marla tried to cut him off. "This is an internal matter." "No," Raphael said, cutting her off. "It's a criminal matter. And every homeowner here has a right to know what their board is doing in their name." Tom folded his arms. "You destroyed a man's pool without telling anyone?" "She said there was a vote," I said. "But there are no meeting minutes, no records, no notice, nothing." Gina shifted in her seat. We discussed it informally." "That's not a vote," Tom snapped. "That's gossip with a clipboard." Murmurs broke out among the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, scrolling through HOA emails, looking for any mention of pool violations or enforcement actions. "Nothing. I've lived here 10 years, said Maria, who ran the daycare on Elm Street. "I've never seen this board approve anything without a paper trail. If you're acting without transparency, you're not representing us." Marla's face tightened like she'd bitten into a lemon. "This is a distraction. Mr. Zimmerman has been non-compliant for years, and I've got full compliance inspection reports showing otherwise," Raphael said, pulling out another folder and handing it to the homeowners. "Not one formal violation in the past year. Every complaint dismissed by your own compliance officer. Until now." The room turned. People who'd once nodded politely to Marla at mailbox clusters now looked at her with clear suspicion. Then Harold, the twitchy-eyed board member, leaned into his mic. "I didn't agree to the concrete thing. I thought it was a bluff." Gina turned ghost white. "You said it was handled. You said legal cleared it." Marla stood up so fast her chair screeched. "The board has the authority." "No," Raphael said, "only within the scope of the HOA charter, which does not include unilateral destruction of private property. You've not only exceeded your authority, you've opened this community up to legal liability." Tom raised his hand. "I make a motion to hold a special election to remove the current HOA board pending the outcome of the investigation." "I second it," Maria said. Marla's voice cracked. "This is a witch hunt." "No," I said, "this is accountability." The vote passed without a single hand in her favor. As we left the room, Marla sat alone at the table, staring at the papers in her lap like they were written in a foreign language. Raphael leaned over and whispered, "You just got outvoted by the people you claim to protect." Outside, neighbors I barely knew clapped me on the back, shook my hand, thanked me for standing up. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. We still had court ahead. But as I stepped into the cool night air, I knew one thing for sure. Marla Kensington had finally poured concrete on the wrong man's property. 7 days after the special election vote and 2 days before the court hearing, Marla Kensington showed up at the county courthouse with a new attorney and a stack of hastily prepared documents she thought would save her. She hadn't realized how many people she'd alienated over the years. The courtroom was packed with Westview Lakes residents, some standing in the back, others lining the walls, many of whom had brought their own written grievances, ready to speak if called. Judge Whitaker, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with a reputation for tolerating no-nonsense, took her seat and immediately began sorting through the case file. She didn't look up when she spoke. "Ms. Kensington, you are being sued for private property destruction, trespassing, and malicious conduct under Civil Code 842. Your defense will be heard after the plaintiff presents his evidence. If at any point this devolves into personal attacks or irrelevant commentary, I will clear the room." "Is that understood?" Marla's new lawyer, a thin man with a nervous blink and a mismatched suit, nodded. Marla said nothing, her jaw tight. Raphael opened with the footage. The court clerk displayed the video on the screen mounted behind the judge's bench. The cement truck reversing, Marla waving it into position. The moment the pour began, Whitaker's pen froze mid-note. The room was dead silent except for the sputtering noise of wet concrete hitting water. When it ended, Raphael handed over the official inspection report from the county assessor and the cost breakdown from the contractor who built the pool. He didn't speak dramatically. He didn't need to. This was not a mistake, he said. It was a targeted act carried out under the false pretense of HOA authority. There was no meeting notice, no vote, no formal complaint. The HOA's own bylaws require transparency, documentation, and due process. None of that happened. Judge Whitaker tapped her pen once. "Ms. Kensington, would you care to explain how this action was authorized?" Marla stood slowly, her voice lower than usual. The plaintiff's pool was constructed without proper review. The HOA board determined that it violated visual harmony standards and encroached on setback limits. We deemed it necessary to remove it. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Did you obtain a demolition permit from the city?" "No." "The HOA has internal enforcement procedures. Did you notify the homeowner in writing, as required under your own charter?" "We posted a notice where—" Marla looked at her attorney, who flipped through papers but found nothing. "It may not have been recorded properly." Whitaker leaned forward. "So, to summarize, you personally authorized a commercial contractor to enter private property without consent, without a permit, without a vote, and without documentation, and then directed them to destroy a structure valued at over $30,000. Marla's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I'll take that as a yes," the judge said, setting down her pen. "Let's move on to damages." Raphael handed over the final invoice: pool repair, re-landscaping, loss of use, and legal fees. The total came to just over $54,000. Marla's lawyer tried objecting on the basis that the HOA, not Marla personally, should bear the cost. Whitaker didn't even entertain it. "The HOA did not authorize this destruction." "You did. You'll be paying personally." Marla dropped into her chair like the air had been sucked from her lungs. But the real blow came 10 minutes later. After the damages ruling, the judge turned to the bailiff and said, "You may bring in the investigator." From the back of the courtroom, Detective Alan Fry entered. He wore a gray suit and held a small folder under one arm. He walked directly to the witness stand and was sworn in. Fry had been investigating HOA misuse of funds in Westview Lakes for over 2 months, long before the pool incident. Someone had tipped off the county about irregularities in HOA expenditures, and Marla's name kept coming up. "Ms. Kensington," he said, "can you explain why over $18,000 in HOA funds were used to retain a private contractor for a job that had no formal approval?" Marla's eyes darted. "The board approved the expense." "No record of that," Fry said. "And the contractor testified that you paid him with a cashier's check drawn from an HOA account that only you had access to." Marla glanced at her lawyer. He shrank into his seat. Fry held up a copy of the check. This is your signature? I manage disbursements. Incorrect, Fry replied. The HOA charter requires 2 signatures for any expense over $2,000. This is one. And we have a copy of the email you sent to the contractor, instructing him to avoid speaking to other board members. Gasps rippled through the room. Gina and Harold, sitting quietly near the back, sunk in their chairs. Judge Whitaker didn't even ask for more. Ms. Kensington, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal review. You may be facing charges for misappropriation of funds and fraudulent use of HOA resources. Marla's face turned a shade of white I hadn't seen before. After court adjourned, Raphael and I stepped outside into the bright midday air. The crowd filtered out behind us, chattering in hushed tones. Tom, the Navy vet, approached, holding a white envelope. We took another vote, he said. Interim board's replacing all locks on the HOA office. She's suspended until further notice. Sheriff's office will be there during the changeover, just in case. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter of apology from the new interim board, along with a check for the full HOA portion of the damages, half of the repair costs. The rest Marla would have to pay herself. We're also pushing to dissolve the Architectural Review Committee entirely, he said. No more beige patrol. I shook his hand. Glad to hear it. As I walked back to my truck, I noticed the cement truck driver standing by the courthouse steps. He looked relieved. She tried to blame me, he said. Told the cops I acted alone. But I kept the signed work order. I'm guessing she didn't think I'd cover my own backside. Glad you did, I said. He nodded and walked off. 2 weeks later, my contractor began the demolition of the concrete-filled crater in my backyard. It took 4 days to jackhammer it out, another 6 to resurface and refill it. The insurance company, after reviewing the court ruling, covered the rest of the repairs under my vandalism clause. By the time it was done, the new pool looked even better than the last one. I added underwater lighting, a stone border, and a small fountain. It wasn't just a pool anymore, it was a monument to the cost of unchecked authority. Marla's criminal case went to the district attorney's office a month later. She was charged with felony property destruction and unlawful use of community funds. Her lawyer tried to settle, but the DA wasn't interested. She pled guilty to reduced charges to avoid jail time, but part of the plea deal required her to resign from all HOA positions permanently. She moved out 3 weeks after the plea. No one came to her going-away gathering, though she set one up in the community email blast. The new board instituted open meetings, posted all documents online, and added a monthly Q&A session for residents. The Architectural Review Committee was abolished, and lawn inspections were now done by a third party with actual training. I never got an apology from Marla, but I didn't need one. Some neighbors still stopped by to talk about it, mostly to laugh, sometimes to shake their heads at how far it all went. But every now and then, someone new asks me how I managed to fight back. I tell them the truth. You fight bullies by knowing the rules better than they do and by having more cameras. And if all else fails, you call a lawyer who hates HOAs even more than you do. By the time the last of the concrete was hauled out and the new pool was humming with clear water and soft underwater lighting, I thought the whole ordeal had finally settled. The lawsuit was over, the criminal charges were filed, and our neighborhood had taken noticeable steps toward sanity. The new interim HOA board was doing its job without drama. For once, things were quiet. But then I got the envelope. It arrived in a plain manila package wedged into my mailbox between a pizza flyer and a water bill. No return address. Inside, a stack of printed emails, a few spreadsheets, and a handwritten note that simply read, "You should see what else she signed." I laid everything out on my kitchen table. The emails were between Marla and a man named Dennis Granger. I recognized his name from a few HOA newsletters he used to handle maintenance contracts before stepping down rather suddenly about a year ago. The messages were short, but not subtle. Marla had arranged for Dennis's company to oversee several maintenance projects that never happened: tree trimming, sidewalk sealing, irrigation replacements. The invoices were all there, totaling over $75,000 across just 9 months. But the work? No record of it. No permits, no inspections, no photos. And none of the residents had noticed anything being done. I pulled up the neighborhood budget reports. The amounts matched. The payments had already been issued. HOA funds, our dues, had been funneled out under the guise of maintenance, all with Marla's signature. It wasn't just about my pool anymore. I drove straight to Raphael's office. He was reviewing a zoning dispute case, but dropped it the moment I slid the documents across his desk. "This is embezzlement," he said. "And if even half these transactions are as fake as they look, it's a pattern." She wasn't just power-hungry. She was robbing the community blind. We spent the next 2 hours compiling everything. Raphael called a forensic accountant he knew, someone who'd worked with him on a housing fraud case a few years back. The guy's name was Lance, and he had the personality of a spreadsheet: dry, precise, and relentless. He took one look at the files and started nodding before we even finished explaining. "I'll need 72 hours, he said. 71 hours later, he called us back into Raphael's office with a full breakdown. Marla had approved fraudulent payments totaling just over $124,000 over the past 18 months. All of it diverted through shell companies linked to Dennis Granger, who, as it turned out, had recently filed for bankruptcy and moved out of state. Raphael immediately filed a supplemental complaint with the county prosecutor, attaching the new evidence. Within a week, a grand jury was convened. Meanwhile, the new board moved fast. They hosted an emergency community meeting and invited every homeowner. The turnout was larger than any HOA event I'd ever seen, standing room only. I stayed near the back, letting Raphael and Lance do the talking. "This isn't just about one corrupt president," Raphael said. "This is about theft. Your dues were stolen and laundered through fake contracts. And the board, as it was previously structured, allowed it to happen without any checks." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd, but no one interrupted. Tom, now acting board president, stepped forward. "We've already frozen the HOA's accounts. A third-party auditor is reviewing all financial activity from the past 2 years, and we've submitted a full cooperation letter to the district attorney's office." Someone asked if homeowners would get their money back. Lance took that one. "Unlikely. Not directly. But if restitution is ordered, and if assets can be recovered, it might happen in part. What's more important now is full prosecution. That sends a message." The next day, Marla was arrested on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. The news spread fast, even landing a brief segment on the local nightly news. The footage showed her being led in handcuffs from her condo, hair undone. No sunglasses this time, just a blank stare and a tight jaw. But the fallout didn't stop there. Dennis Granger was picked up in Arizona 3 days later. He'd been living in a rented mobile home under a different name, but a tip from a former employee led investigators right to him. He was charged as a co-conspirator in the fraud scheme, and his plea deal required full disclosure of every transaction and account Marla had touched. With all that in motion, the DA's office reached out to Raphael. They offered to let me give a statement at sentencing. I didn't hesitate. The courtroom was quieter this time. No neighbors, no board members. Just Marla, her defense attorney, the judge, and a few clerks. She'd taken a plea deal, no trial. Just sentencing. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I walked to the front with a copy of my original pool construction bill in one hand and the HOA budget report in the other. "I thought I was just dealing with a petty tyrant," I said. "Someone who liked control for the sake of it. But this wasn't about rules or order. It was about money. And while she was measuring people's lawns and fining them for mailbox paint, she was signing away our money to fake contractors and personal friends. She didn't just damage my property. She damaged this community. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to." The judge sentenced her to 5 years in state prison and ordered full restitution. She'd be required to pay back every cent proven to have been stolen plus damages. Her assets were seized: 2 bank accounts, a rental property, and a luxury SUV registered under a holding company. All of it was liquidated. They also barred her from serving on any HOA board or nonprofit organization for life. After sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse and didn't look back. A month later, the new HOA board announced a full charter overhaul. Raphael helped them draft it pro bono. It included term limits, mandatory financial audits, and a provision that any enforcement action required documented evidence and a 2/3 board vote. The Architectural Review Committee was replaced with a volunteer group of residents who could only make recommendations, not enforce penalties. Nobody missed the beige patrol. As for the pool, it became a neighborhood hangout spot. I hosted a barbecue every other Saturday, and people brought drinks, dishes, and folding chairs. Kids swam. Adults laughed. The whole place felt lighter. One evening, Tom stopped by after most of the guests had gone. He looked around at the clean deck, the glowing fountain, the laughter still echoing from the side yard. "You know," he said, "a year ago, none of us talked. We just nodded at each other and kept our heads down. Now we've got potlucks, a rail board, and people actually volunteering to help out. All because someone decided to dump concrete where it didn't belong." I raised my glass. "Sometimes it takes a disaster to wake people up." He nodded. "Well, this time we're staying awake." We sat there for a while, watching the last of the sun disappear beyond the rooftops. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I'd gotten something better. Peace. Justice. And a pool that no one would ever dare mess with again.